He fired her thinking he could forget her, but when he saw her in another man's arms, the billionaire discovered that power was nothing compared to the jealousy consuming him. Watch this story to the end. You'll be surprised by this tale. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing. The glass mansion in the Upper East Side contrasted with New York City's cloudy sky. Gabrielle Miller adjusted her black blazer in front of the mirror, confirming every detail was impeccable before stepping into the executive car waiting for her. The driver, in a Vega Global Holdings uniform, stood by with the door open. At 35, Gabrielle knew this day would mark a turning point in her career. The first woman from humble beginnings to assume the executive directorship of the multinational giant in the United States. "Oh, everything set for the committee meeting, Dr. Miller?" asked the driver, adjusting the rearview mirror. "Yes, Anthony, all set." Her voice was firm, but her eyes, fixed on the urban landscape unfolding outside the window, revealed the internal battle she was fighting. It wasn't just the weight of the new position that worried her, but the recent ghosts that still haunted her. 3 months earlier, her world had collapsed when she found the messages on Peter's phone. 6 years of relationship reduced to an exchange of explicit texts between him and Michelle, her department colleague. The pain of betrayal had been amplified by the humiliation. Everyone knew before her. When she finally confronted Peter, he simply shrugged. "You're never present, Gabby." It was always the company, the job, the next promotion. Since then, she had emotionally armored herself. She transformed pain into fuel, channeling all her energy into work. The promotion came as recognition, but also as salvation. A new chapter where she could simply be the brilliant executive everyone expected, with no room for vulnerabilities. The car stopped in front of the impressive, sustainably designed building that housed Vega's headquarters. Gabrielle took a deep breath, placed her heels on the marble floor, and walked with the posture she had learned to cultivate since leaving the less affluent borough of Queens to conquer a place in the corridors of corporate power. "Good morning, Dr. Miller. The committee is already waiting." The president's secretary greeted her with a practiced smile, leading her through the mirrored corridors to the imposing meeting room. When the double doors opened, 12 faces turned to her, mostly middle-aged men in impeccable suits. She recognized each of them, except for the figure standing out at the opposite end of the table, a man of approximately 40, wearing a navy blue suit without a tie, with slightly disheveled dark hair and a relaxed posture that clashed with the formality of the environment. "Gentlemen, good morning." Gabrielle kept her voice steady, taking the empty chair at the opposite head of the table. "I believe we can start as per the agenda." The board president, a 70-year-old man with a deliberate voice, stood up. "Before the official agenda, I'd like to formally introduce our new executive director, Dr. Gabrielle Miller, whom many of you already know for her excellent work in the finance department." There was a brief round of applause, and also, taking this opportunity, our new majority shareholder in the United States, who acquired 35% of the North American operations, Mr. Raphael Montgomery. The man in the blue suit slightly inclined his head in a silent greeting, his dark eyes fixed on Gabrielle with a disconcerting intensity. There was something familiar in that gaze that instantly unsettled her. "Welcome, Mr. Montgomery." She maintained a professional tone. "I hope our partnership will be productive." A subtle smile formed on his lips. "I'm sure it will be surprising, at the very least." The meeting proceeded with quarterly reports and financial projections. Gabrielle presented her strategic vision for the next 12 months with the precision and clarity that had made her known within the corporation. However, throughout her presentation, she felt Raphael's gaze on her. It wasn't a look of professional assessment, but something more invasive, as if he were trying to read beyond her words. When lunch was announced, Gabrielle discreetly tried to retreat to her office, preferring the solitude of her room to forced networking. Raphael, however, intercepted her in the hallway. "Running away from corporate lunch, Dr. Miller." His voice had a playful tone, not very diplomatic for someone who just took over the directorship. She adjusted her posture, facing him directly. "I have a video conference scheduled with our global headquarters in London, Mr. Montgomery." "Raphael, just Raphael." He took a step closer. You know, your presentation was flawless, but I felt a crucial detail was missing. And what would that be? Sincerity. His eyes studied her with disturbing intensity. You spoke as if you were reading a corporate script. I want to know what you really think about Vega's situation in the United States. Gabrielle felt growing irritation. My professional opinions are precisely what I expressed in the meeting room. Mr. Montgomery, if you want something beyond that, perhaps you need to schedule a private meeting. He smiled, seemingly satisfied with the answer. That's exactly what I'll do. And, Gabrielle. He called her as she was already walking away. That audit of the North American expansion accounts, I'm curious to know your real conclusions, not the ones that will be presented to the board. She froze. The audit was a confidential project. They're signed directly by the global CEO. How did he know? I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. Raphael shrugged with an enigmatic smile. My assistant will send an invitation for dinner. Tomorrow, at the Starlight Room. We can discuss matters that don't belong within these walls. Before she could refuse, he walked away, leaving her with a sense of discomfort and an unsettling question. Who, after all, was Raphael Montgomery beyond the headlines describing him as the new prodigy of American business? Back in her office, Gabrielle immediately researched everything she could about the new shareholder. The results were impressive, but vague. Raphael had built a diversified empire in less than a decade, with investments ranging from technology to agribusiness. The son of a traditional New York family who had lost everything in the 90s, he had disappeared for a few years before returning as a successful entrepreneur. Details about how he built his initial fortune were hazy, fueling rumors of unorthodox dealings. Even more intriguing was his reputation as a corporate reformer. He acquired stakes in companies with structural or ethical problems and transformed them, often exposing internal corruption schemes in the process. This explained his interest in the audit she was secretly conducting. Vega Global faced suspicions of irregularities in its North American expansion, particularly in mining contracts in Canada and Mexico. Gabrielle had been assigned to investigate discreetly, reporting only to the global CEO. If Raphael knew about this, he either had internal informants or was part of the problem himself. That night, as the driver took her back to her apartment in Soho, Gabrielle couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. There was something in Raphael's gaze that disturbed her, a mix of challenge and recognition, as if he knew something about her that she herself didn't. The dinner invitation arrived by email at 10:14 p.m., signed by his personal assistant, formal, discreet. With a message that a car would pick her up at 8 p.m. Gabrielle hesitated, her finger hovering over the reply key. Prudence told her to refuse. Mixing professional matters with private meetings was exactly the kind of trap women in leadership positions should avoid. But her investigative intuition spoke louder. That dinner could reveal crucial information for her audit. She replied with a concise confirmation and went to sleep with the unease of someone who knows they are about to cross an invisible line. The Starlight Room was lit only by candles when Gabrielle arrived. Wearing a discreet black dress, she had carefully chosen to appear professional, even outside the corporate environment. The maitre led her to a reserved table in a secluded corner, where Raphael was already waiting, without his suit, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves that revealed a discreet yet visibly exclusive watch. Punctual. He stood up, pulling out her chair. A rare quality these days. Some of us need to be twice as efficient to be taken seriously. Mr. Montgomery, he smiled, pouring wine into her glass without asking. Raphael, please, we're out of the office. And let me guess, only child, raised solely by her mother, first in the family to go to university, full scholarship, graduated with honors and turned down 3 more lucrative job offers to stay at Vega, because she believed in its growth potential. Gabrielle felt a chill. Have you been investigating my past? I just read your resume carefully. He took a sip of wine. And I recognize determination when I see it. I come from a place not so different from yours, you know. The difference is I chose less orthodox paths. The conversation flowed surprisingly well. Raphael had a rare ability to switch between casual charm and incisive business analyses. He spoke about his vision for Vega, his frustrations with corporate bureaucracy, and, to Gabriel's surprise, demonstrated deep knowledge of sustainability and social responsibility, topics she believed were just marketing veneer for most executives. After the main course, he finally touched on the subject that hung between them. "The audit you're conducting," he lowered his voice, leaning across the table, "will find irregularities in the Canadian contracts amounting to approximately $28 million, diverted through a shell company called Alpine Resources." Gabrielle paled. That information was precisely what she had discovered the previous week and had not yet officially documented. "How do you—" "Because I've been tracking that money for the past 6 months. Raphael interrupted her, his eyes now intense, without the casual charm. "The question you must be asking yourself is, why would someone buy shares in a company that is about to face a financial scandal? That's exactly what I'm asking." He smiled, but it was a different smile now. There was something predatory about it. "Because when you understand who is behind Alpine Resources, you'll realize we're on the same side, Gabriel. And because I needed someone incorruptible inside Vega to legitimize what I'm about to expose." "And what makes you think I'm incorruptible?" Raphael studied her for a few seconds before answering. "Your history, your reputation, and most importantly, the fact that you're here, having dinner with a man who clearly represents a threat to the status quo of the company you just joined." The rest of the evening passed in a tense balance between professional revelations and a personal attraction that Gabrielle desperately tried to ignore. Raphael was magnetic in a way she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps never. The way he spoke, how he gestured, how he watched her when he thought she wasn't noticing. Everything about him sparked a curiosity that went beyond professional mystery. When dinner ended, he insisted on walking her to her car. On the sidewalk, lit by the crescent moon, Raphael stopped, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "There's something about you, Gabrielle Miller, that makes me want to break all my rules." His voice was lower, more intimate. "And believe me, I have many rules. Rule number 1 should be not getting involved with co-workers." She tried to maintain her composure, despite his proximity. "Technically, I'm not your colleague, I'm your shareholder." He took a step towards her, closing the space between them. "Which makes everything even more complicated, I know." For a moment that seemed eternal. Gabrielle felt he was going to kiss her. Part of her, a part she thought she had silenced after Peter's betrayal, wanted him to. But Raphael merely lightly touched her face with his fingers, an almost imperceptible contact that, paradoxically, felt more intimate than any kiss. "Tomorrow I will send a confidential document to your personal email." He stepped back, regaining his professional posture. "Read it carefully. After that, you decide whether we continue this conversation or if you prefer to formally report me to the board." "What kind of document?" "The kind that changes lives and careers." He opened the car door for her. "Good night, Gabrielle." During the drive home, Gabrielle battled conflicting feelings. The attraction she felt for Raphael was undeniable and dangerous. The mystery surrounding him, instead of pushing her away, drew her closer. A trap she had promised never to fall into again after the humiliation with Peter. Simultaneously, her analytical mind worked on the professional implications. If Raphael was right about Alpine Resources, the audit she was conducting took on much larger proportions than she initially imagined. And if he was willing to expose this scheme even as a majority shareholder, what were his true motivations? Upon arriving at her apartment, Gabrielle took longer than usual to remove her makeup. In the mirror, the image she saw was not just that of the determined executive who had built her reputation, but also of a woman confronting vulnerabilities she believed she had buried. Raphael's gentle touch on her face still seemed to burn her skin, awakening sensations she had tried to put to sleep with work and ambition. Her phone vibrated with a notification, a message from Raphael. "The truth is not always comfortable, but it is liberating. Be prepared." Gabrielle put her phone aside, watching the city lights from her apartment window. Tomorrow, when that document arrived, she would have to make decisions that could redefine not only her career, but also the boundaries she had set for herself. The line between professional integrity and personal desire had never seemed so thin or so dangerous. The document arrived promptly at 7 in the morning. Gabrielle had slept poorly, alternating between restless dreams and long periods of insomnia. When the email notification sounded, she was already on her third cup of coffee, analyzing financial reports at the kitchen table. The file was password protected. Below, in the message, only one sentence. "The name of your first pet." Gabrielle felt a shiver. How did Raphael know about Pipoca, the caramel-colored stray dog that had accompanied her throughout her childhood in Queens? That went beyond casual resume research. Hesitantly, she typed Pipoca, and the file opened. It was a detailed report on Alpine Resources, the shell company Raphael had mentioned. The information was devastating. Internal documents, bank transfers, compromising emails. The scheme was much larger and more complex than her initial audit had detected. It involved not only diversions in Canada and Mexico, but also payments to US government officials, inflated contracts, and an intricate money laundering network that spanned 3 continents. Even more disturbing, the name that appeared as the architect of the entire operation was Edward Thompson, the current board president of Vega Global in the United States and her mentor since she joined the company, the man who had always supported her, who had championed her promotion, whom she considered a second father after her own father's premature death. She felt nauseous. If this were true, her career was built on a lie. Edward had strategically placed her in positions that would never threaten his scheme, feeding her ambition while keeping her away from the corporation's real secrets. Her recent promotion, she now realized, probably had a similar purpose. He wanted her as a respectable shield while he continued his operations in the shadows. At the end of the report, a handwritten note from Raphael. "Now do you understand why I bought shares in Vega? I'm not after profit, but justice. Edward Thompson destroyed my brother, financially and psychologically. My brother discovered part of this scheme 5 years ago and tried to report it. He was silenced, defamed, had evidence planted against him. He committed suicide 3 months later. No one believed him, but I did, and I've been gathering this evidence ever since. Are you my ally or my enemy in this war, Gabrielle? Decide before lunch." Attached to the message, a photo. Raphael next to a man very similar to him, both smiling at a marina, handwritten at the bottom, "Charles and I, a month before I lost him." The revelation of personal revenge changed everything. Raphael was not just a reformist investor. He was a man on a mission of retribution. This made him unpredictable, dangerous, but also deeply human. Gabrielle closed her laptop and walked to the window, watching New York City awaken under a fine drizzle. Her analytical mind was already evaluating scenarios, risks, alternatives. If she reported everything immediately, the company would collapse. Thousands of jobs would be lost, including hers. If she confronted Edward first, her life would be at risk. If she allied with Raphael, she would be involved in a personal vendetta that could tarnish her own reputation by association. And there was another complication her rational mind desperately tried to ignore: the growing attraction to Raphael, the connection she felt with him since their first meeting. Working alongside him on this investigation would mean deepening that dangerous connection. Her phone rang. It was Edward. "Gabrielle, my dear, we need to talk before the committee meeting. I have disturbing information about our new shareholder." His voice sounded paternal as always. "Raphael Montgomery is not who he claims to be. I've discovered he has a personal vendetta against our company." She felt her blood run cold. "What kind of vendetta?" "Old matters, misunderstandings. Nothing for you to worry about. Just keep a professional distance from him, yes? There are rumors he approached you yesterday." The ease with which Edward lied, the subtle manipulation in his tone. How had she not noticed before? 15 years working alongside him, trusting him, admiring him. "Of course, Edward. I'll be careful. See you at the meeting." Upon hanging up, her decision was made. She replied to Raphael's email with just one word: Ali. Vega's headquarters seemed different that morning. The same mirrored corridors, the same elegantly dressed people. But Gabrielle now saw everything through a lens of distrust. How many of them knew? How many actively participated in Edward's schemes? In her executive office, she found a bouquet of white orchids, her favorites, Another personal detail she didn't know how Raphael had discovered. The card simply read, 12:30 p.m., Building Terrace, come alone. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and teleconferences. Gabrielle maintained her professional mask, but every time she crossed paths with Edward in the corridors, she had to control her revulsion. The man she considered a mentor now seemed like a stranger. The same affable gestures, the same paternal smile, now revealed as refined manipulation tools honed over decades. At 12:27 p.m., she went up to the 42nd floor terrace. The day had cleared, and the New York City skyline stretched in all directions, a view that normally inspired her, but today only amplified her feeling of moral vertigo. Raphael was already there, his back to the door, observing the city. When he turned to face her, his gaze had a different intensity. The mask of casual charm had been replaced by an almost painful seriousness. "You came." His voice betrayed genuine relief. "I haven't decided how far my alliance goes, Raphael. I want to better understand what's happening." He nodded, indicating a concrete bench away from the security cameras. They sat side by side, maintaining a professional distance, although Gabrielle could feel the warmth emanating from him, mixed with the discreet scent she was already beginning to associate with his presence. "Edward called me this morning. He's trying to separate me from you." "That was expected." Raphael kept his gaze on the city. "He did the same with everyone I tried to get close to in recent years. The man is meticulous in protecting his circle." "Why me? Why did you choose me for this alliance?" Raphael turned to face her, his eyes scanning every detail of her face before answering. "First, your reputation for integrity. Second, your strategic position. Third," he hesitated, "something I can't rationally explain. Ever since I started investigating Vega and saw your name in the internal documents, something told me you were different, that you weren't part of it. How long did you investigate me before buying the shares?" 8 months. He held her gaze. "I read your reports, analyzed your decisions, observed how you positioned yourself in board meetings. You have a pattern, Gabrielle. You always choose the ethical path, even when it costs more or takes longer." There was genuine admiration in his voice, but also something more, something that made her heart race. "And your plan now? Expose everything at once and watch the company collapse?" "No." Raphael moved a few inches closer, lowering his voice. "We want justice, not destruction. I have a plan to expose Edward and his accomplices without bringing down the entire company, but for that I need you as executive director, making certain strategic decisions in the coming weeks." "What kind of decisions?" He explained in detail, a complex sequence of corporate moves that would gradually isolate Edward and his allies, while protecting the company's legitimate operations and the jobs of innocent employees. It was brilliant, meticulous, and risky. "If anything goes wrong, my career will be over," she observed, "and possibly my freedom too." "I know." For the first time, Raphael seemed to hesitate. "That's why I need to be absolutely sure you're willing to see this through. Once we start, there's no turning back." The wind on the terrace picked up, disheveling Gabrielle's perfectly styled hair. Without thinking, Raphael reached out and brushed a strand that had fallen over her eyes, his fingers lightly grazing her skin. The contact, though brief, sent an electric current through her body. "Why do I feel like there's more at stake here than corporate justice?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. Raphael kept his hand near her face, his dark eyes penetrating hers as if searching for something beyond words. "Because there is," he finally admitted. "And that scares me more than Edward and all his schemes." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the terrace door opening. Both instinctively pulled away, regaining their professional posture. It was just a maintenance worker, but the reminder of constant surveillance in the corporate environment was timely. "Tonight, 9 p.m., my apartment." Raphael discreetly slid her a card with an address. "There we can speak freely. Bring your laptop and the audit reports you've already compiled." She nodded, pocketing the card. Before standing up, however, she briefly held his wrist. "Raphael, if I discover you're manipulating me as Edward has all these years, there will be no place in the world where you can hide from me." Instead of looking offended, he smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his eyes. "That's exactly why I chose you, Gabrielle Miller. Now, go first. I'll leave in 5 minutes so we don't raise suspicion. The rest of the day passed in escalating tension. Edward called an emergency meeting with her and 2 trusted directors, announcing a restructuring that, Gabriel now understood, would only serve to further consolidate his control over the North American operations. "We need to be strategic with our new shareholder," Edward explained, his mellifluous voice concealing sinister intentions. "Offer him superficial victories while maintaining real control over decisions." Gabrielle nodded, playing the part of the loyal protégé, while her stomach churned in revulsion. When the meeting ended, Edward stopped her at the door, placing his hand paternally on her shoulder. "I heard you and Raphael Montgomery had dinner last night." She maintained her composure, though her heart raced. "He wanted to get to know the executive team better. It was strictly professional." Edward studied her for a moment, his kind eyes now revealing themselves to be calculating. "Be careful, Gabrielle. Men like him see women in positions of power as double conquests, professional and personal. I wouldn't want to see you become another trophy on his shelf." The veiled condescension infuriated her, but she kept her expression neutral. "I appreciate the concern, Edward, but we both know my personal life has never interfered with my professional decisions." Of course," he smiled, squeezing her shoulder before walking away. "Just keep me informed of any developments." At 8:45 p.m., Gabrielle parked her car a few blocks before the address Raphael had given her, a basic precaution against potential observers. The building was in Chelsea, an elegant but not ostentatious neighborhood, not what she would expect from a billionaire, which intrigued her even more. The doorman was waiting for her, clearly informed of her arrival. He led her directly to the private elevator that accessed the penthouse. When the doors opened, Gabrielle found herself in a spacious loft, with minimalist decor and a breathtaking view of the illuminated Central Park. Raphael was waiting for her, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, a radically different sight from the polished executive she had encountered at Vega. Without the formal attire, he seemed younger, more approachable, and, paradoxically, even more attractive. "Welcome." He gestured to the dining area, where documents were spread across a solid wood table, along with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. "I hope you don't mind the informality. This is my true home, not the apartment I keep to impress investors." The revelation of this more personal side surprised her. "I thought billionaires lived in mansions with infinity pools," he smiled, pouring wine for both of them. "I have a house like that in the Hamptons. I rarely visit it. I prefer spaces that don't make me forget where I came from." Over the next 2 hours, they delved deeply into the investigation. Raphael revealed much more than on the terrace: documents, recordings, testimonies from former employees. The conspiracy led by Edward was vast, involving politicians, judges, and executives from other corporations. Even more disturbing were the indications that the illegal activities had resulted in covered-up environmental disasters in indigenous communities in the Canadian Arctic. "This goes far beyond money laundering," Gabrielle murmured, analyzing photos of a river contaminated with heavy metals. "Lives are at stake." "Always have been." Raphael sat beside her, so close that their arms touched. "That's why I can't just expose everything and leave. We need to ensure that Edward and his accomplices are held accountable, but also that there is reparation for these communities." She watched him as he explained the next steps of the plan. There was a passion in his eyes, an intensity that transcended personal revenge. For the first time, she began to consider that perhaps her initial perception was wrong, that behind the mysterious and seductive billionaire was a man genuinely driven by justice. "Why didn't you take this directly to the authorities?" she asked. "With all this evidence," Raphael gave a bitter smile. "I tried, 2 years ago. I found out that 3 of the main prosecutors were on Edward's payroll. My informant in the Attorney General's office was transferred to a remote town in the Canadian wilderness a week later. I learned that some battles need to be won from the inside out. As the night wore on and the wine dwindled in the bottle, the conversation gradually shifted from the case to more personal matters. Raphael spoke about his brother, an idealist who believed he could change the corporate system from within, only to discover how deep the corruption ran. Gabrielle shared her own journey: the mother who worked as a cleaner to pay for her private school, the prejudice she faced at the elite university, the doors that remained closed until Edward opened them for her. But the irony is that I owe my career to the man I now need to bring down, she reflected, swirling the empty glass between her fingers. You would have gotten where you are with or without him, Raphael stated with surprising conviction. Edward merely recognized your talent and exploited it for his own ends. Your merit is exclusively yours, Gabrielle. There was a sincerity in his words that disarmed her completely. Sitting beside him on the sofa, with incriminating documents scattered around and the twinkling city beyond the windows, Gabrielle felt a connection that transcended professional alliance or even physical attraction. It was as if, amidst the ethical and moral chaos they faced, they had found in each other a point of clarity and mutual understanding. It's funny, she said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. I spent 15 years building defenses so as not to be manipulated or underestimated in the corporate world. I learned to distrust compliments, to question motivations, to never show vulnerability. And now, my entire career, everything I've built, depends on trusting you, someone I met 2 days ago. Raphael placed his glass on the coffee table and turned to face her directly. You don't need to trust me, he said, his voice low and intense. Trust the evidence, trust your own intuition. And if at any point you feel I'm lying or manipulating the situation, leave. I will understand. The raw honesty of that statement caught her off guard. In an environment where everyone wore masks, professional, social, ethical, transparency was rare and valuable. Without thinking, Gabrielle leaned forward and lightly touched his face, a gesture of recognition she intended to be brief. Raphael captured her hand before she could withdraw it, holding it against his face. His dark eyes studied hers, seeking permission, hesitation, or certainty. What he found must have encouraged him, for in the next moment, he closed the distance between them and kissed her. The kiss was gentle initially, almost reverent, as if he feared she might fall apart at his touch. But when Gabrielle responded, sliding her fingers through his hair and drawing closer, the gentleness gave way to an urgency that reflected days of accumulated tension and repressed attraction. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, Raphael kept his forehead pressed against hers, his eyes closed as if trying to memorize the sensation. This complicates everything, he murmured. It was already complicated, she replied, surprised by her own calm. But now it's real. He opened his eyes, studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. You know Edward will use this against us if he finds out, don't you? He'll say I'm manipulating you, that the whole case is just a personal vendetta. Let him say it. Gabrielle pulled back enough to face him clearly. The evidence speaks for itself. And as for the rest, what's happening between us, that's between you and me. No one else, Raphael smiled. And there was something vulnerable, almost insecure in that smile, a facet of the powerful businessman few must have seen. When this is over, he said, intertwining his fingers with hers, when Edward is facing justice and the company is clean, what happens to us? It was a question she herself had been avoiding since she felt the first spark of attraction. Her romantic history was marked by practical choices, relationships that fit into her ambitious agenda. Raphael represented the opposite. Unpredictable, intense, potentially devastating to the stability she valued so much. I don't know, she replied honestly, but I want to find out. He nodded, understanding the depth of that simple answer. For a moment, they remained like that, connected, vulnerable, aware of the monumental risks they faced professionally and personally. Then Gabrielle's phone vibrated, breaking the spell. It was a message from Edward. Emergency meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. Subject, restructuring of the finance directorship. Your presence is crucial. She showed the message to Raphael, who frowned. He's accelerating the schedule. He must be suspecting something. Or just monitoring my movements. Gabrielle felt a wave of anxiety. What if he knows I'm here? Impossible. I took precautions. Raphael squeezed her hand reassuringly. But this means we need to act faster. Phase 1 of the plan needs to start tomorrow, not next week as we had planned. She nodded, quickly recomposing herself and returning to the strategic mode that characterized her professionally. I'll need the original documents for the Canadian contracts, And access to the mirror server you mentioned. You'll have all that by noon. He hesitated, then leaned in to kiss her again, more briefly this time. Be careful, Gabrielle. Edward Cornard is a dangerous man. I can take care of myself, she smiled, standing up and collecting her bag. After all, I survived 15 years in the corporate world being underestimated daily by men like him. Raphael walked her to the elevator, maintaining a respectful distance now that they had returned to practical matters. Tomorrow, same time, he said as the doors opened. And Gabrielle. He hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words. Regardless of what happens with the investigation, what happened between us tonight was real. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't manipulation. She stepped into the elevator, turning to face him one last time before the doors closed. I'll prove it to you, he promised, his intense gaze engraving itself in her memory as the elevator began to descend. During the ride home, Gabrielle tried to organize her thoughts. In less than 3 days, her life had been turned upside down. She discovered her mentor was a criminal, allied with a mysterious man on a dangerous crusade, and even more disturbing, allowed herself to feel something she had sworn never to experience again after Peter's betrayal. Nighttime New York City sparkled under the fine drizzle, the lights reflecting on the wet asphalt. Tomorrow she would face Edward on his own territory, initiating the plan that could destroy her career or elevate it to a new level of recognition. The stakes couldn't be higher, professionally and personally. As she parked in front of her building, Gabrielle made a promise to herself. Regardless of the outcome, she would no longer be a pawn on anyone's board, neither Edward's nor even Raphael's. This was her battle now too, and she would face it on her own terms. The meeting room on the 40th floor was silent when Gabrielle entered, precisely at 6:55 a.m. She had carefully chosen her attire, a dark grey pantsuit with blood-red accents, colours that conveyed both authority and caution. Her hair was impeccably styled in an austere bun, her discreet makeup highlighting only the determination in her eyes. Edward was already there, accompanied by Mark Benson and Richard Vance, 2 directors she had always known to be his trusted men. Now she understood they were, in fact, his accomplices. Gabrielle, my dear. Edward stood up, opening his arms in his usual paternalistic gesture. Thank you for coming so early. She accepted the mechanical embrace, feeling like an actress in a sinister play. When the board president calls, the executive director attends. Simple as that. Her reply, slightly colder than usual, made Edward give her an assessing look before indicating the chair to his right. The seating arrangement already said it all. She was being positioned as an ally, not an adversary. They didn't suspect yet. Let's get straight to the point, Edward began as soon as she sat down. Our new majority shareholder, Raphael Montgomery, is making concerning moves. Reliable sources indicate he may be planning a hostile restructuring, starting with the finance department. Gabrielle maintained a neutral expression, though her heart raced. They didn't know she was with Raphael, but they had clearly detected some suspicious movement. Someone was watching them, as Raphael had predicted. What kind of moves? She asked, making unnecessary notes to avoid prolonged eye contact. Richard, the CFO, leaned across the table. He requested access to all financial records from the last 5 years, not just the official reports, but the working spreadsheets, preliminary records, everything. It's his right as a majority shareholder, Gabrielle observed, maintaining a professional tone. Do we owe him anything less than transparency? The momentary silence that followed her question was revealing, exchanges of glances among the 3 men, a palpable discomfort. Edward was the first to regain his composure. Of course not, dear. The issue isn't transparency, but timing and intent. Why now? Why with such urgency? And why has he shown particular interest in you? The last question came loaded with innuendo. Gabrielle felt her face flush, but she maintained her composure. In me? I don't know what you're talking about. We had a professional dinner and a few brief conversations in the hallways. Edward smiled, that paternal smile that now seemed like a grotesque mask. I have eyes throughout the entire company, Gabrielle. I know you 2 met on the terrace yesterday. I know the conversation seemed intense. It was a bluff, she realized immediately. He wasn't sure. He was fishing for information. Staying calm now was crucial. He wanted my opinion on the Canadian subsidiary. As executive director, I should be available to our shareholders, shouldn't I? She met Edward's gaze without hesitation. Or is there some reason why I shouldn't discuss Canadian operations specifically? The question was a deliberate bait, and Edward bit. His eyes hardened for a fraction of a second before regaining his affable smile. Absolutely none. Canada has been an extraordinary success for us. He paused, calculating. That's precisely why I'm concerned about any hasty restructuring. Years of careful work could be compromised. Years of carefully planned crimes, she corrected mentally. The nauseating feeling of betrayal returned with force. This man had been her mentor, her role model, almost a father figure. And all this time, he had used her as a pawn in his corrupt schemes. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, leaning back in her chair with a confidence she didn't feel. "I assume you didn't call me here just for a warning." Edward exchanged glances with the other two directors before proceeding. "We need a united front. Any request from Raphael related to international operations must go through me first. Any meeting with him must be reported, and most importantly," he leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a valuable secret. "We are accelerating the restructuring we discussed yesterday. As of today, Mark will temporarily assume supervision of the finance department, reporting directly to you, of course. It was a clever move. Mark was Edward's most loyal soldier. Placing him in the finance department would create an additional layer of protection between Raphael and the incriminating records. Gabrielle had to use all her willpower not to show alarm. I understand the concern, but won't this seem too defensive? Raphael might interpret it as confirmation that something is wrong." "Let him interpret it," Edward shrugged. "Legally, we are merely exercising prudent management in times of shareholder transition, and you, my dear, will be our public face in this process. Your credibility is unassailable." Her credibility, her greatest professional asset, built over 15 years of hard work and ethical decisions, now being used as a shield for criminal operations. The irony was almost unbearable. "Do I have your trust then?" she asked, looking directly into Edward's eyes. He smiled, paternally squeezing her hand across the table. "Absolute and unrestricted. As always, you are like a daughter to me, Gabrielle. Together, we will navigate these turbulent waters." The meeting proceeded with operational details of the restructuring. Gabrielle actively participated, suggesting adjustments that seemed collaborative, but which would secretly create openings for the plan she had devised with Raphael. When it finally ended, an hour later, she had a clear picture of Edward's growing panic and the vulnerabilities they could exploit. Leaving the room, she sent a coded message to Raphael as they had agreed. "Project Antares approved. Immediate implementation required." In the elevator, alone for a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions. She was playing a dangerous game against a man who not only knew all the rules, but had created them. A man who would not hesitate to destroy her if he discovered her betrayal. And then there was Raphael. The kiss from the night before, the unexpected connection, the vulnerability he had shown. Was it real or part of a more sophisticated manipulation? Could she trust her own feelings amidst so much chaos? Her phone vibrated. A message from Raphael. "Documents available on secure cloud, mirror server active, dinner tonight, my apartment, 8 p.m. Below, as a personal addendum. Thought about you all night." That simple phrase sent a wave of warmth through her that caught her off guard. Amidst a corporate conspiracy that could destroy her career, there was still room for something as trivial and human as the anticipation of a reunion. The duality was disconcerting and strangely comforting. The day that followed was a calculated dance of appearances. Gabrielle implemented the structural changes ordered by Edward, while secretly copying crucial documents to the mirror server created by Raphael. When Mark appeared in her office to monitor the finance department's work, she greeted him with studied cordiality, assigning him responsibilities that would keep him busy away from sensitive areas. At 3:43 p.m., she received a seemingly routine email from the global headquarters in London, but which contained, encoded in a seemingly innocuous attachment, confirmation that the global CEO was aware of the parallel investigation and was discreetly supporting her. It was the institutional backing they needed to move forward. The plan was in motion. While Edward believed he was protecting his scheme, he was actually just consolidating evidence against himself. Each new restriction, each attempt to conceal information, became another item on the list of suspicious behaviors that Raphael meticulously documented. At 7:55 p.m., after ensuring she wasn't being followed, Gabrielle parked near Raphael's building. She wore casual clothes now, dark jeans, an emerald green silk blouse, and a light blazer, a conscious attempt to separate the calculating executive from the woman who, against all odds, was allowing herself to feel something new. Raphael was waiting for her with dinner prepared, something simple he had cooked himself, he explained with a mix of pride and self-deprecation. I learned to cook when I was studying in Europe. It was either that or starve on the allowance my father could send. The revelation of this additional personal detail, that the mysterious billionaire had faced financial difficulties before building his empire, strengthened the connection forming between them. Throughout dinner, as they discussed the next steps of the investigation, Gabrielle was surprised by the naturalness of their interaction, as if they had known each other for years, not days. "Edward is panicking," she explained, describing the morning meeting. "He placed Mark as a watchdog in the finance department, but I created a bypass in the system that will give us continuous access. The question is, how much time do we have before he realizes what we're doing?" Raphael poured more wine, thoughtful. "Less than I'd like. My contacts in the Attorney General's office confirmed we can present the case next week. But we need irrefutable proof of the link between Edward and Alpine Resources. What exactly are we looking for? An email? A direct bank transfer? Anything that connects him personally to the operation? So far, he's maintained layers of intermediaries. He's meticulous." Raphael sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. "Charles had mentioned a specific document before he—" His voice faltered for an instant. "Before he died. Something about an account in the Cayman Islands." Gabrielle frowned, a distant memory surfacing. "Wait. 3 years ago, Edward asked me to sign a transfer authorization for an offshore investment fund. He said it was a legal structure to reduce the company's tax burden. The fund had a strange name. Something with birds. Condor Holdings?" Raphael asked, suddenly alert. "Yes. How do you know?" "It was the codename Alpine Resources used for international transactions." Raphael was already on his laptop, typing frantically. "If you signed that authorization, your name might be linked to the scheme without you knowing." Gabrielle's blood ran cold. "Are you saying I could be implicated as an accomplice?" "Possibly." Raphael looked at her intently. "But this also means you might have access to records Edward considers safe, precisely because your name is on them." The revelation was disturbing, but it also offered a unique opportunity. In the next 2 hours, they built a strategy based on this new information. Gabrielle would officially request the complete records of all transfers she had authorized in the last 5 years, a request that would seem natural coming from an executive director concerned with compliance. The adrenaline of the conspiracy eventually gave way to physical and emotional exhaustion. When they finally closed their laptops, it was past midnight. Gabrielle leaned back on the sofa, feeling the weight of the past few days. "I should go home," she murmured, without making any move to get up. "Tomorrow will be intense." Raphael sat beside her, his fingers finding hers in a soft but electrifying touch. "Stay," he simply said. It wasn't just an invitation to spend the night, but to cross another line, to deepen a connection that had already surpassed professional barriers. Gabrielle knew she should hesitate, that prudence demanded emotional distance until the case was resolved. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw not the ruthless billionaire seeking revenge, but the man who had cooked for her, who had spoken of his brother with a choked voice, who had touched her as if she were precious. "I can't promise anything beyond now," she whispered, moving closer to him. "I don't know what will happen when all this is over." "Now is all I ask," he replied, his lips meeting hers with an urgency that spoke of long-contained desire. What followed was a mutual discovery, not just physical, but of vulnerabilities and strengths that both had carefully hidden from the world. In the hours they spent together, the roles of executive and vengeful billionaire dissolved. revealing only Gabrielle and Raphael, two survivors who had found an unexpected haven in each other. The next morning, Gabrielle woke up in Raphael's arms, feeling a peace that contrasted sharply with the chaos they knew they were about to face. For a few moments, she allowed herself to simply exist in that bubble, watching the rising sun illuminate the contours of his face as he slept. Reality, however, quickly asserted itself with the insistent vibration of her phone. A message from her assistant. Edward had called another emergency meeting for 9 a.m. All directors were required to attend. "It started," she murmured, waking Raphael with a light kiss. "Edward is gathering his troops." He opened his eyes, instantly alert. Earlier than we expected, he must have detected some movement. Dressing quickly, Gabrielle transformed back into the ruthless executive, though her eyes retained a new softness when she looked at Raphael. "I'll request the Condor Holdings records today. If everything goes as planned, we'll have definitive proof by the end of the day." Raphael held her by the shoulders before she left, his expression serious. "Be careful. Edward Cornard is a dangerous man. If he suspects you—" "He won't," she interrupted him confidently. "He still sees me as the loyal protégé, the daughter he never had. His arrogance will be his downfall." "Even so," Raphael insisted, "keep our secure channel open at all times. Any sign of trouble, activate the red alert. I have people ready to intervene." She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. With a final kiss, this time laden with unspoken promises, she left for what she knew would be the decisive day of her career. Vega Global was buzzing with tension when Gabrielle arrived. Employees whispered in the corridors. Executives gathered in apprehensive groups. Rumors of a major restructuring circulated, fueled by Edward's defensive moves. Her assistant intercepted her on the way to her office. "Dr. Miller, Mr. Edward is already in the boardroom with all the directors. They are waiting for you." "Thank you, Clara. Can you let them know I'm on my way? I just need 5 minutes to retrieve some information from my office." Those 5 minutes were crucial, enough time to send the formal request for the Condor Holdings records to the legal department, with copies to the global CEO and internal audit, a seemingly bureaucratic move that, in reality, was the centerpiece of her strategy. When she entered the meeting room, all eyes turned to her. Edward, at the head of the table, wore an expression that mixed concern with poorly disguised irritation. "Finally, Gabrielle, can we begin?" She took her seat, noting Raphael's absence. "Apologies for the delay. I was finalizing the compliance request we discussed yesterday." Edward frowned. "What request?" "The review of international transfers I authorized in recent years," she explained with studied naturalness. "Considering the concern with our new shareholder, I thought it prudent to ensure my own record is impeccable." The shadow that crossed Edward's face was almost imperceptible, but for Gabrielle, trained to read micro-expressions in corporate negotiations, it was clear confirmation. He was alarmed. "We could have discussed this earlier," he commented, regaining his composure. "There are procedures for this type of review." "Certainly. I followed all of them." She smiled, projecting innocence. "The request has already been sent to legal, with copies to London. Full transparency, as I've always advocated." The rest of the meeting was an exercise in control for both, Edward trying to maintain an appearance of normalcy while clearly planning his next moves, Gabrielle perfectly playing the part of the diligent executive, oblivious to the political implications of her actions. When the meeting ended, 2 hours later, Edward stopped her at the door. "We need to talk privately, Gabrielle." She nodded, following him to his private office on the executive floor. The spacious room with panoramic views of New York City had once been the setting for countless mentoring conversations between them. Today, it felt like an emotional minefield. "You've changed," he said as soon as he closed the door, abandoning his paternal tone. "You're more independent, almost defiant." "I'm just doing my job, Edward." "As I've always done." He studied her for a few moments before sitting behind his imposing mahogany desk. "Raphael Montgomery is poisoning you against me. I see it in every decision you've made in the last few days." "That's absurd." She kept her voice firm, though her heart raced. "I have been absolutely loyal to the company and your leadership." "To the company, yes, to me." Edward opened a folder on the table, revealing photographs, Gabrielle entering Raphael's building, the two talking on the terrace. You've been spending quite a bit of time with our new shareholder, for someone who claims to maintain only a professional relationship. She felt a chill down her spine, but maintained her composure. The photos were compromising but not decisive. I'm building a strategic relationship with our main shareholder, exactly as you taught me to do all these years. She leaned forward, deciding to counterattack. Unless there's some specific reason why you don't want me to get close to him. Edward smiled, a cold smile he had never directed at her before. You know, I always admired your intelligence, Gabrielle. Ever since you were that determined intern from Queens, with cheap clothes but bright eyes. I saw your potential immediately. I nurtured it. I protected it. He paused dramatically. And now you repay me with betrayal. It's not betrayal to work for the good of the company, Edward. She held his gaze without flinching. The company? He laughed bitterly. You have no idea what I've built here, the battles I've had to win, the compromises necessary. This market isn't for idealists, my dear. It's for survivors. Survivors like Charles Montgomery? The name slipped out before she could contain it, a tactical error she immediately regretted. Edward's face visibly paled. For a few seconds, the silence in the room was absolute. So that's it, he finally spoke, his voice dangerously low. Raphael told you his little tragic story and you, with your soft heart, believed it. Pathetic. I don't know what you're talking about. She tried to retreat, but it was too late. Of course you do. Edward stood up, circling the desk to approach her. Charles was a naive boy who thought he could change the corporate world with ideals. When he discovered how things really work, he didn't have the stomach to deal with reality. What happened next was his choice, not mine. He killed himself after you destroyed him, Gabrielle accused, abandoning all pretense. After you planted evidence against him, after you defamed him across the entire market. Edward studied her for a moment, then laughed, a genuinely amused laugh that completely unnerved her. My God, Raphael really believes that, doesn't he? That his little brother was a martyr, an innocent victim of the evil Edward Thompson. Isn't it true? The truth, my dear Gabrielle, is that Charles Montgomery was stealing from the company, not to expose corruption, but to fund his own vices, drugs mainly. When I confronted him with the evidence, he threatened to invent stories about illegal operations to blackmail me. I didn't plant evidence against him, I just revealed the ones he himself created. The revelation caught her completely off guard. Could Raphael be wrong? Could his crusade for justice be based on false premises? I don't believe you, she said, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. Of course not. You've already chosen your side. Edward returned to his chair, suddenly looking tired. What saddens me is not your alliance with Raphael, Gabrielle. It's your naivety. After all these years, I thought you had learned how the world really works. Doubt settled like a parasite in her mind, but Gabrielle forced herself to remember the concrete evidence she had seen. Documents, transfers, emails. The illegal operations were real, regardless of Charles's story. If I have nothing to fear, she said, regaining her confidence, then you won't mind my request for a review of the transfers to Condor Holdings, will you? The look Edward gave her confirmed everything she needed to know. There might be some truth in his words about Charles, but there was also undeniable guilt in the illegal operations. You have until the end of the day to withdraw that request, he said calmly. Otherwise, I will consider this a declaration of war. And believe me, Gabrielle, you don't want to be on the other side of a trench with me. Are you threatening me, Edward? I'm offering you one last chance at loyalty. He smiled paternally, but his eyes remained cold. Think carefully. Your entire career was built under my protection. Without me, you're just that girl from Queens with too many degrees and too few connections. The offense hit her like a slap, but it also crystallized her determination. Edward had always seen her that way. His creation, a piece on his board, never an equal. Thank you for the advice, she replied, standing up. I'll consider it carefully. Leaving the room, Gabrielle felt strangely light, despite the explicit threat. The mask had completely fallen, no longer mentor and protégé, but declared adversaries. There was clarity in that, at least. In her office, she immediately sent an encrypted message to Raphael. Direct confrontation. Edward knows. Has photos of us. Allegations about your brother. Need to talk urgently. The reply came almost instantly. My car picks you up in 20 minutes in the underground parking lot. I have important news too. While she waited, Gabrielle received a notification from the legal department. Her request regarding Condor Holdings had been temporarily suspended by direct order from Edward. It was expected, but still a revealing move. If he had nothing to hide, there would be no need to block access. In the parking lot, Raphael's driver discreetly waited for her. During the drive to his apartment, Gabrielle battled contradictory thoughts. The trust she had developed for Raphael versus the seeds of doubt planted by Edward. What if Charles really was guilty? What if Raphael was using her for a personal vendetta based on false premises? When she arrived at the apartment, she found Raphael on a video conference with Vega's global CEO. Seeing her, he quickly ended the call. It happened, he announced, a contained excitement in his voice. Edward blocked your request, exactly as we predicted. The global CEO has just authorized an emergency investigation conducted directly by global headquarters. Forensic audit teams are on their way to the United States right now. The revelation should have been comforting, but Gabrielle felt only a deep exhaustion settle over her. Raphael, we need to talk about your brother. She sat down, facing him directly. Edward said things you need to clarify. His expression instantly closed off. He's desperate, Gabrielle. He'd say anything to turn you against me now, perhaps, but I need to hear your version. She kept her voice firm even as her heart tightened. He said Charles was stealing from the company to support a drug addiction, that he threatened Edward with false accusations when he was discovered. Raphael visibly paled, his fists clenching in a tension that ran through his entire body. My brother struggled with depression, he finally said, each word clearly painful. He used unprescribed medication for a while, yes, and Edward used that against him, twisted the story, made it seem like he was just a common addict. His voice trembled with contained emotion. Charles discovered the Alpine scheme by accident. When he tried to report it internally, Edward destroyed him professionally and personally. He planted evidence, spread rumors, isolated him completely. How can you be sure? Gabrielle asked softly. Raphael stood up, walking to a desk in the corner of the room. From a locked drawer, he retrieved a small storage device. Because Charles documented everything here, his diary, recordings, copies of documents. He extended the device to her, his hand slightly trembling. I found this among his belongings after we lost him. I never had the courage to turn it over to the authorities, because I knew Edward had bought protection at every level. I needed someone on the inside, someone with access and credibility. I needed you. Gabrielle took the device and, feeling its literal and metaphorical weight, why didn't you show me this before? Because I wanted you to form your own conclusions based on the corporate evidence, not on my personal tragedy. Raphael sat beside her, his gaze intense. And because I was afraid that if you knew my initial motivation was revenge, you wouldn't trust me. The raw honesty of that confession touched her deeply. She connected the device to her laptop and spent the next hour absorbing its contents. Charles's detailed diary, documenting his gradual discovery of the scheme, his frustrated attempts to alert authorities, the systematic harassment he suffered, culminating in his last entries, where despair deepened to the point of no return. When she finished reading, silent tears ran down her face. The truth, as always, was more complex than the versions presented by Edward or Raphael. Charles had fought his own demons, yes, but also a corporate machine designed to crush anyone who threatened its secrets. His death was not merely the result of depression, but of a system that had methodically isolated and destroyed him. I believe you, she finally said, reaching for Raphael's hand. And I believe Edward needs to be held accountable, not just for your brother, but for all the communities affected by his schemes, or for all the ethical principles he sacrificed on the altar of profit. Raphael intertwined his fingers with hers, the vulnerability in his eyes more evident than ever. When this started, I only wanted revenge, he admitted. To destroy Edward, no matter the cost. But meeting you, he hesitated, searching for the right words. You reminded me that justice is not the same as revenge, that the goal cannot be just to bring down one man, but to correct a system. That revelation of personal transformation, of moral growth, confirmed for Gabrielle what her heart already knew. Her feelings for Raphael were real and based on something deeper than physical attraction or temporary alliances. Her phone vibrated with an urgent message from Clara, her assistant. Edward has called an extraordinary board meeting for tomorrow, 8 a.m. Agenda: your removal for unethical conduct and conflict of interest apurs. He's accelerating, Raphael observed, reading the message over her shoulder. He wants to remove you before the audit team arrives. Then we also need to accelerate. Gabrielle was in strategic mode again. Can we use the contents of this device along with what we've already collected? It's risky, Raphael pondered. But if the global CEO has already authorized the investigation, perhaps it's time to show all our cards. In the following hours, they worked tirelessly, compiling documents, organizing evidence, preparing a devastating presentation that would leave no doubt about the guilt of Edward and his accomplices. When they finished, it was past midnight. You should stay here tonight, Raphael suggested, concern evident in his voice. Edward is cornered. We don't know what he's capable of. Gabrielle considered the proposal. Part of her wanted to stay, not just for safety, but for the connection they had deepened throughout that turbulent day. However, her strategic intuition spoke louder. I need to be home, prepared and rested for tomorrow. If I don't show up at the office as usual, it will look like I'm running away. Raphael reluctantly agreed, but insisted on arranging discreet security for her apartment. Before she left, he kissed her intensely. A kiss that carried not only desire, but unspoken promises and shared determination. Tomorrow it ends, he whispered, for better or for worse. The next day dawned under a grey sky, as if New York City sensed the corporate storm about to erupt on the 42nd floor of Vega Global. Gabrielle arrived early, impeccably dressed in a white pantsuit, a color of surrender in many cultures, but which in that context represented her refusal to hide in the shadows. The lobby buzzed with rumors. Employees exchanged tense glances as she passed, clearly already aware of the extraordinary meeting called to discuss her future. In her office, she found Clara waiting, visibly anxious. Dr. Miller, Mr. Raphael Montgomery has requested your presence in the boardroom. He arrived 20 minutes ago with the global CEO and a team of lawyers. The information caught her by surprise. The global CEO was only supposed to arrive in the afternoon. According to the plan, something had changed. Thank you, Clara. She maintained her composure, though her heart raced. Can you let them know I'm on my way? In the elevator, Gabrielle took a deep breath, centering herself. Everything she had built, her career, her reputation, even this new connection with Raphael, would be put to the test in the next few minutes. Life as she knew it would end today, for better or for worse. When the boardroom doors opened for her, the scene inside was surreal. On one side of the imposing oval table, Edward and his allies, pale, tense, clearly caught off guard. On the other side, Raphael next to Jonathan Steele, Vega's global CEO, accompanied by a team of executives from global headquarters and solemn-faced lawyers. Ah, Gabrielle. Jonathan stood up to greet her, a gesture that immediately established her position in that room, not an accused, but an ally of global leadership. We were waiting for you to formally begin. Edward stared at her with a mixture of shock and controlled fury. Clearly, he did not expect the CEO to come personally, much less to support Raphael and Gabrielle. What is the meaning of this, Jonathan? Edward tried to maintain the tone of authority he had always displayed. I called this meeting to discuss serious accusations against Gabrielle Miller, not for a surprise visit from global headquarters. Actually, Edward, Jonathan replied calmly, we are here to discuss much more serious accusations against you and some members of your team. He gestured to one of the lawyers, who distributed sealed folders to everyone present. What you have in your hands is a preliminary report of the investigation we have been conducting in recent weeks, with fundamental collaboration from Dr. Miller and Mr. Montgomery. The silence that followed was absolute as those present opened the folders. Gabrielle watched Edward's face gradually transform from initial indignation to shock, and finally to the realization that he was cornered. This is absurd, he finally said, closing the folder with force. These allegations are fabricated by a man with a personal vendetta against me. Raphael Montgomery bought shares in this company with the sole purpose of destroying me because of his addict brother, who... "Be careful what you say about my brother, Edward." Raphael's voice, though low, cut through the room like a blade. "We have the recordings Charles made of your conversations. We have his diary detailing every threat you made, every promise to destroy him if he spoke." Edward visibly paled, but quickly recovered. "Jonathan, you cannot believe these slanders. I have worked for Vega for 30 years. I built this operation from scratch and diverted approximately $84 million through fraudulent contracts with Alpine Resources," Jonathan completed coldly. "Not to mention the environmental and human damage caused in the Canadian operations that you deliberately concealed from shareholders." As the meeting proceeded, with Jonathan detailing the evidence, the lawyers explaining the legal implications, and Edward's allies gradually distancing themselves from him, Gabrielle remained silent, observing the downfall of the man who had been her mentor and who now revealed himself completely. There was a sadness in that moment of justice, not for the downfall itself, but for the lies that had formed the basis of 15 years of her professional life. Raphael, sitting beside her, discreetly touched her hand under the table, a simple gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes about the connection they had built in such a short time. When Edward finally understood the extent of his defeat, that he would not only lose his position, but face criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, he turned to Gabriel with a look that mixed hatred and a strange form of respect. "You surprised me," he said, ignoring the others present. "I always thought that ambitious girl from Queens would do anything to stay on top. It seems I underestimated your principles." "And I overestimated yours," she replied simply. The meeting ended with Edward and his key allies being escorted out of the building, while Jonathan announced that Gabriel would temporarily assume the board presidency until the complete restructuring of the U.S. operation. Hours later, when the initial turmoil had passed, Gabrielle found herself alone in her office, now the largest on the executive floor, watching the sunset over New York City. The city that had always represented her ambition now seemed different. Not a battlefield, but a horizon of possibilities. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Raphael entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "To celebrate justice," he explained, placing the bottle on the table. "Or perhaps just to mark the end of a chapter." "And the beginning of another?" she asked, a hesitant smile on her lips. Raphael approached, his eyes revealing not only the relief of revenge concluded, but something deeper and more lasting. "That depends on you," he said, pouring the champagne. "Jonathan offered me the board presidency permanently. I refused." "Why?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Because I know it's your rightful place. You built this career, Gabrielle. You deserve to reap the rewards." He handed her a glass. "Besides, I never wanted to be a corporate executive. My investments were always just a means to an end. Initially revenge, now something more." "And what would that something more be?" Raphael smiled, that smile she had learned to associate with his most genuine moments. The chance to build something meaningful, something Charles would have approved of. He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "The Montgomery Foundation for Corporate Ethics, an independent watchdog dedicated to exposing and combating corruption in the American business world." The idea touched her deeply. A transformation of personal pain into collective purpose, of revenge into sustainable justice. "It's an ambitious project," she commented admiringly, "and it will need strong leadership once established." His eyes met hers with intensity. Failed someone with corporate experience, unwavering integrity, and the courage to confront powerful individuals. The implicit proposal hung between them, not just professional, but personal. A shared future, built on common values and a connection that had blossomed in the most improbable circumstances. "Are you offering me a job or something more, Raphael Montgomery?" she asked, a playful smile on her lips. He approached, closing the space between them. "I'm offering a partnership in every possible sense of the word." Gabrielle put down her glass, considering everything they had lived through in recent weeks. The betrayal discovered, the alliance forged, the shared risks, and finally, the open heart when all her defenses had fallen. It wasn't just attraction or gratitude she felt for him, but a deep recognition of souls who, despite different origins, shared the same fundamental values. "A partnership," she repeated, savoring the word. "I think I can work with that." When their lips met, the kiss did not carry the urgency of their first ones, but a deeper promise of time, of building together, of a future neither had imagined possible before their paths crossed. Outside, New York City began to light up its nightlights, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded in one of its skyscrapers. The city would continue its relentless pace, just as both their lives would move forward, transformed by the confrontation with corruption, but also by the unexpected meeting of two souls who, together, had found something more valuable than power or revenge, the possibility of starting anew, of building something meaningful from the ashes of past betrayals. And as the champagne bubbled in their forgotten glasses, Gabrielle and Raphael sealed their commitment, not only with words, but with the silent certainty that some stories, even starting in scandals and secrets, can end not in tragedy, but in redemption.